So the second imperative being this idea of, well, surprise, surprise, focusing on your shoppers. But it's amazing how many times you find retailers chasing competitive parity, falling into the Me Too trap, and losing sight a little bit of, what does my shopper truly desire? What will really make an impact to who my shopper is? A great example that I share here is around what we noticed between the chase for digital supremacy between Starbucks and McDonald's, and a lot of people would compare them, and you could draw up an assessment of who was doing better from a digital perspective, and McDonald's and Starbucks was racing ahead with its mobile order ahead, while McDonald's seemed to be lagging behind. That sort of analysis, while all great, it kind of seems to miss the point that Starbucks is a owned and operated, fully licensed operation, has relatively close to zero franchisees. McDonald's, highly franchised operation. By the way, McDonald's 75% of the revenue comes from drive-through. Their definition of digital, who their shopper is, what their shopper is doing with them, it's very different from what a Starbucks is. In a certain sense, you shouldn't and can't compare those two businesses. I'm glad that they did not chase each other in terms of trying to copy what Starbucks was doing. McDonald's has defined its own digital strategy and is doing some amazing stuff that we'll speak to further down in the conversation. But I wanted to go around again and see if you find retailers truly clear not only on their purpose of being, but also who their shopper is and focusing on what their shopper desires and how that translates into their in-store experiences.
Sure. I certainly think, and I don't want to be too rah-rah all these direct-to-consumer brands, but they don't have to, contend with some of the same issues. And I think it might allow them to focus more on, who their key shopper is and what they, want to do for them. I've talked about this before, but, Outdoor Voices, certainly it's this, I want to say, but I might be getting their demographic wrong, a little bit of a younger crowd. It's really about the experience of both buying their product, which is, kind of a basic but cool, affordable, and that they can also then be involved in these activities that they feel that are really important. So you can go on a group run out of the store. You can go there and just stretch out. It's really, that's a huge component of who their community is, and they want to feed that, and they're focused on it. They're opening a door on Fifth Avenue, and I don't think it will be any different than their store on Lafayette, that they are going to want to, support that community who's their consumer.
Yeah, I think that when you're looking at the retail landscape and you're looking kind of at what retailers, every retailer is going to have a different segment of the business. The shopper imperatives absolutely vary by retail segment. It varies by the target market. But also when you look at kind of the digital experience and you look at the enabling technologies, the key point that retailers really have to step back away from is to really understand at what point in the shopper journey is my customer going to be utilizing this, experience or enabling technology, because, that's very important when you're building out, what it is they're going to do. So understanding at what point in the shopper journey that customer is going to experience it is very important. I also think you have to be super clear on the measurable objective that you want to obtain. So for example, just saying, okay, through this initiative, which we think is relative to our customer, we're going to drive profit. Well, you kind of have to slice it down even more. We're going to drive profit how? Through loyalty? Yes, and if it's through loyalty, then what specifically? Are we going to increase shopper frequency with this? Are we going to increase, more full regular price spend? Are we going to be, using other aspects? So you really have to detail out and connect it back to that overriding strategy.
I think this, again, goes back to the idea that you can't lose focus of some fundamentals in all retail segments, right? More than ever before now, right? The customer has to be at the center of everything. The shopper imperatives are critical. Part of each brand's responsibility is to identify, where do they fit? Not every shopper imperative is going to make sense for every brand, and it will vary by their segment, by their product mix, by their culture, right? By what they represent themselves as to the customer. And it's easy to be overwhelmed in some cases or distracted, right, by other interesting technologies of the day that seem trendy, that seem like it might get some customers' attentions, and lose sight of what you're really trying to fulfill in that experience for a customer. And you can't lose sight of that, right? That's a key fundamental, is that to keep the customer at the center of everything that you're doing. I mean, certainly I think everyone would accept Amazon has mastered that technique, right? They've mastered the ability to keep the customer at the center. But then along with that is also, I think, a recognition, and this maybe crosses between this point and the previous one, and Gary, you mentioned Walmart before, you have to have a willingness to experiment and willingness to fail, right? So I think that a good example here is when you mentioned that Walmart tried the scan and go, they found that it wasn't resonating with their customers, so they decided to take that back. And that's okay, there's nothing wrong with that. Just because you create a potentially new digital focused experience doesn't automatically mean it's always going to be successful. It's okay if it doesn't work, but you have to recognize that it doesn't fit with your shoppers and that you might have to come up with something else and move on to the next type of experience that suits your customer.
And it's amazing that when an organization has the ethos to be focused so sharply on the consumer, that you'll actually see it fall on both sides. So continuing with the Walmart example, when it does work, you look at what they're doing with their automated pickup towers that they really designed for buy online, pick up in store, listen to what the consumer was going, what the experience was. To Shelley's point, focused on the customer journey, and in fact found out that the greater friction existed in online order return. And they're now able to use those empty cubbies of the pickup towers to address a friction point in another part of the customer journey. And suddenly by doing that, they're unlocking value both for shoppers and for the enterprise. And that's kind of the whole, that underscores the point being made here, is around being focused on the shopper, focused on the shopper journey, focused on eliminating friction from those journeys that matter to your shoppers most.